Dan Hill, the Dan Hill, I am so excited to talk to you. I have spoken to so many people, but this one, I am really excited about this interview. Welcome, welcome. How are you?
I'm just great, Meredith. It's just wonderful to see you and talk to you. Actually, I have the same poster that's behind you. I have that same one in one of my bedrooms, the love poster.
Oh, okay. Beautiful. Gotta love the love.
Yeah. Mhm.
um, you know, the greatest thing about you that I say on my radio show, and let me just first start off by saying that every time I play you, it is an absolute honor to play you on the air, because all of these decades later, the greatest thing that I hear from the listeners is, wow, that took me back, or I haven't heard that in a while, or, that just made me feel so good. And I was singing along in my car. I call you Mr. Goosey Man. I say that on the air all the time because whenever a Dan Hill song comes on, those little goosies hit your arm and the hairs stand on end. And within the first 20 seconds, that is a Dan Hill song and it is just perfection.
Thank you. That's so kind of you. And you taught me a new word. This is the first time I've ever heard the word goosey. So you're enlightening me, and we've just begun.
Well, let's just go back in time a little bit, because
Sure.
this is what I do every week with my audience, is take them back to those nostalgic decades of the 70s and 80s, which in my opinion has the greatest music of all time. And you're all over both of those decades. I mean, you were able to have two international hit songs in each of those decades. I mean, what a wild ride that would have been, 10 years apart. Can you talk to me a little bit about going back to 77 to Sometimes When We Touch? And I know the whole story about, writing this song, because I've heard it and I've told it on air, but I want you to tell the people now about writing that song that haven't heard that story.
Okay. Well, I was 19 years of age. I was assigned to RCA Records as a singer-songwriter, and I was starting to get covers. Some great Black artists had already cut my songs. The wonderful jazz singer from England, George Harry Belafonte, wanted to cut "You Make My Be." Feliciano wanted to record "Seat of Music." So I was getting action on my songs, but the word back then was that I was going to make it as a songwriter, not as an artist. But at that time, I hadn't seen the royalties yet. I was making $1.89 for the civil service. I grew up in a very, very sheltered, conservative neighborhood, Don Mills. So I didn't have any exposure to females. Guys like me in high school, we were thought of as the nerds, kind of the bookish kids. And generally speaking, girls like the jocks and the bad boys and the macho guys. They didn't really like people like me or my brother. So all this to say that I was not experienced with women. So this woman was the first woman I'd had any kind of serious romantic connection with. So she was 22. I was 19. She was an older woman. She was very experienced. I was inexperienced. And she continued to like to tell me that there were all these other guys she was seeing that were smarter, richer, more mature. She was dating a guy who was playing for the Toronto Argonauts, and she was dating the photographer for the Toronto Sun. So she always made me feel like I wasn't good enough. I think we've all been there in one. It happens to men, it happens to women. So I set out to write this song, hoping that somehow in this song, she would then realize that it was worthy. That was the only reason why I wrote Sometimes When We Touch. I wrote it over 2 days. When I got back from work at the civil service, from 4:30 to 7:30, 2 days. And the reason I start the song with, "You asked me if I love you," and I choke on my reply, is because she liked to play games. She would always say, "Do you love me?" And if I said yes, she'd say, "Danny, you're too needy." If I said no, she'd say, "Danny, you're too cold." So that's why I start the song with "Sometimes you ask me if I love you," and I choke on my reply. Because our whole family are, I call them word slingers. My brother, my father, my son, we were always great with words. But if I got in a situation where we were actually physically touching each other, because I'd never done that before, my word power went right out the window. I was like a total goner, just touching her shoulder, which is why I wrote Sometimes When We Touch, the honesty is too much. Because the minute we touched, the honesty was too much.
Wow.
So I phone her up, and I play her the song with my guitar, because back then, obviously, no internet, no computers, no cell phones. What you do if you're trying to impress a girl, was you'd phone her up and you'd put the phone like this between your, collarbone and your chin, and you'd play,
Oh
and I
yeah.
played the song, and I'm convinced now I'm going to get her, that now she's going to see that I am worthy. I finished the song. There's a kind of this beleaguered silence, and then she says, Danny, did anyone tell you for a 19-year-old, you're too intense? I can't handle you. You're too intense. I'm running off with the CFL football player. So the song chased her away. But, then when it became a massive hit all over the world in 1977, she mysteriously reappeared. But I think we
And what
all,
was your reaction to that? I would love to know, what did you say to her when she miraculously reappeared and wanted to talk to you after you're an international songwriting singer hit?
well, I just sort of felt sorry for her. But I think most of us, if we've been really hurt by someone, we don't go back there again. We have to protect
Mhm.
ourselves. So I wasn't going back there with her. I just kind of felt sorry for her, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I mean, what an amazing story. That really is a beautiful story. Tell me a little bit about your tell me a little bit about your songwriting process, because I always find it interesting, actually beyond interesting, to speak to songwriters, because you all are the ones that have the stories, right? So when you start to think about songs in your head, I mean, do you get the melody first? Do lyrics start to come? How do you piece all of that together?
Well, luckily enough, I started playing classical guitar when I was a little boy. So it really helps for me as a songwriter, it really helped that I was a very, very good guitar player and also a very, very good piano player. So usually what I do, Meredith, is I kind of go back and forth between the guitar and the piano, trying to find this perfect chord progression. Sometimes I know what I'm going to write about, I haven't, and sometimes I don't. Often though, even when I started writing songs as a teenager, sometimes the words just fly out of my head, and I don't really preordain them. I don't contrive them. I'm not a formula hit songwriter. So even with a song, like sometimes when we touch, it just boom, those lyrics just came. Almost all my hits have happened very, very quickly. And I have to have my phone on record the whole time, because it's like I'm in this weird, almost like this wild hypnotic spell, where it's just happening. And it's not usually till I finished writing the song that then I realize why I wrote it. Even Can't We Try was a song I wrote because my partner at the time was angry at me because I'd done a video 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks before, where I had to do a bedroom scene with this model in the video. Obviously, we weren't doing anything. There were cameramen, soundmen, but my partner was very upset, thought that this was a very dishonorable thing to do. So she wouldn't sleep with me. So that's why I wrote Can't We Try as a way to kind
Wow.
of reach out and say, come on, we got to try harder here. So that's pretty much always been my process. Is Something's going on in my life, and somehow it comes out in my writing, and it usually comes out very, very quickly. And it's almost like I don't know where it's coming from. That's how fast it is, which is why it's very hard for me to write with other people, because I just write very, very quickly. And they kind of sit there, almost, they say they're intimidated, though I don't intimidate them. It's just that it comes so quickly. Sometimes I do have to write hits for particular artists, like when Keith Stegall and I wrote "I Do Cherish You," which was a #1 country song, a #1 pop song in America.
Yes.
Mark needed a hit single, and although he'd already recorded our song "She's in Love," that went on to be a hit in country music, we set out in Nassau to write his first single. So in that particular case, we were writing a hit song for Mark Wills, and fortunately, it worked.
I have to say, I mean, I'm really a lyrics girl, and every time you hear a Dan Hill song, the lyrics are phenomenal. Never thought that I could love. Beautiful lyrics.
Thank you.
In Your Eyes, beautiful lyrics.
Thank you.
I was surprised. I didn't realize at first about I Do Cherish You. And of course, growing up, uh, I mean, you don't laugh. I was born in 79. So, of course, I'm a 90s kid.
Love
So,
it.
hitting, 98 degrees, I loved that song. And I had no idea that that was a Dan Hill song. But when I realized that it was a Dan Hill song, it makes sense, because those lyrics completely, it's you. It's just perfect and beautiful.
Thank you. Well, it was wonderful. Keith Stegall is by far the best songwriter I've ever written with. I've written more hits with Keith Stegall than any other co-writer I've ever worked with. So You know, I have to say, Meredith, to be honest, I have the greatest job in the world. We were just in Nassau for a week, staying at Compass Point Studios, which was where Lenny Kravitz and Boyz II Men and Mariah Carey were recording. And every morning we would write a song, just piano and keyboard, kind of, you know, and we wrote 5 songs in 5 days, and the last song was "I Do Cherish You." The minute we wrote
Wow.
it, I knew this was going to be a hit. I just knew it.
Wow. So you wrote that in Nassau.
Yes, Keith and I wrote it in Nassau. Then as I told you, we were writing this initially for Mark Wills. So I
Yeah.
had to decide in order to have a song covered, obviously you have to record the song. So
Right.
I'm usually the person that records the song. The reason I've been so successful as a songwriter, part of it is because I'm a great singer, because the singing really, really is like the so-called advertisement for the song. So when I went to record my demo of "I Do Cherish You," I didn't know whether to do a country demo and hire a country singer, because I am not a country singer,
No.
or I should do it myself. And I said, I'm just going to do it myself. So I just did it as if I was making my own album, and I sent it to Keith. I didn't hear anything for 4 weeks, and I thought I'd made a major miscalculation, and I should have brought in a country singer and made it a country record. So I called Keith 4 weeks later, and I said, what happens? I guess you don't like the way I demoed it. He says, it's already a single. It's going to number one in 2 weeks. So
Oh my
Keith has
God.
written so Keith has written so many hits. I mean, he wrote "We're in This
Yeah.
Love Together" for El Jarreau, "Sexy Eyes" for Dr. Hook. It's almost like
Yes.
Keith was just like one more hit. But for me, I'm going, this is extraordinary. So I think again, it paid that I just recorded it in an authentic way. And of course, then that was the version. My version was the one that went to 98 degrees. So, you know, again, that song actually has had more airplay in America than any other song I've ever written. But because I'm not the singer, everyone's always going to think I'm just the guy that did Sometimes, you know. But it was quite extraordinary to see how well that
No,
song.
I look beyond that. I see you. I see more. How do I hear that? I want to hear your version of "I Do." Do you have that on any of your albums,
Yes,
or
I
do you have that
do.
on YouTube?
Yeah, my 2009 Intimate album CD was basically an album of me singing the songs that had been hits for other artists first. For example,
Oh,
"The
wow.
Love of My Life" was for example, "She's in Love," again, #3 in America for Mark Wills, or uh, "Seduces Me," you know, the song I won the Grammy for, when producing and writing for Celine Dion's "Falling Into You." So that album is just me covering the covers of my songs. "I Promise You," which was recorded by the Backstreet Boys, for
Right.
example. So yeah, so it's on the Intimate 2009 album.
Okay. That's on my list. I'm getting it. I got to listen to it. I got to hear you because you're brilliant. You're a brilliant singer. Brilliant. Not just great. You're brilliant because when you listen to your songs and the way that you harmonize and vocalize and it's just so unbelievably smooth and beautiful. Again, the Gooseys. I mean, the second your voice comes on, it's Gooseys, and it's just perfection.
You're very kind. Actually, one of my favorite parts of what I do for a living, Meredith, is I'm often called into the studio to coach the singers and teach them how to sing my songs, because my songs tend to have very, very wide vocal ranges. That's why
Hmm.
they do really well with groups like NSYNC and Backstreet Boys, because they have 4 different people singing tenor, you know, bass. So one of my favorite jobs is going into the studio and coaching people like Celine Dion and showing them how to sing these songs. I don't know where I learned to sing, because I never had a vocal lesson in my life. It's With me, everything is intuitive, you know, songwriting, playing,
Wow.
singing. I'm not, I've never been a formal education kind of person.
Well, that's a gift.
Well, again, as you know, because I know you've been doing this for a long time, despite you being so young, born '79, if I recall correctly, you
Yes.
know, it helps just by doing it a lot. You know, the more we do these things, the more natural we become at it. So
Yeah.
all of this is a function of doing it well, I've been doing it for about 60 years.
And you're so good at it. I want
Thank
to talk really quickly about this pandemic because I think what it gave everybody the chance to do was to sit in their home studios and create. And that's exactly what you did. I mean, what about Black Lives? Brilliant, brilliant song. And
thank
then on the other side of here, You say, you know, there is light on the other side of here, which is just so great because, again, as people think of you as a love song creator, your words in these two songs that have to do with what we're dealing with now is so intoxicating. And you get sucked in, and it really almost like it just helps to heal a little bit, you know, with your words and understanding the severity of the situation. So when this pandemic hit, and forgive me for asking, but are you still residing in Canada?
Yeah, I actually purchased the house that my dad purchased in 1965 for $18,000. So that very neighborhood that I was talking to you about earlier when I talked about how sheltered I was growing up,
Yeah,
I'm back in this house. So yeah, I live in the house that our whole family grew up in starting in
that's
65.
amazing.
Yeah, so I've always lived in
That's
Toronto.
amazing.
I've never moved. Yes, I've spent years in LA making albums, writing for superstars, but Toronto has always been my home, and it will always be my home.
That's beautiful. So
So,
tell me a little bit about when Canada shut the borders and everybody had to hunker down, and getting into this creative mode in not a love song way, in a very real way. I mean, how did those lyrics just come to you there?
well, actually, I wrote On the Other Side of Here because I'd been in the hospital for a bad reaction to a diabetes drug, and there was a COVID outbreak in the hospital. I was in Guelph, and so I
Mm,
had to go into 2-week isolation, obviously, because of being in a hospital. And so I was in 2-week isolation, Meredith, with nothing but I was in a room by myself for 2 weeks with my guitar and my keyboard. So On the Other Side Here was written when I was in isolation. So I was obviously, as all of us, trying to come to terms with what was going on, for me personally, for all of us. And On the Other Side of Here was written because I was writing it for myself as much as for anyone else, to remind myself that despite all the horrible things that were going on and still are going on, that there's got to be some kind of light, some kind of aspiration, some kind of
mm.
healing and optimism for all of us. So I wrote it for me, but at the same time, I was writing it for everybody. I
That
wrote
is
it
beautiful.
wrote it very quickly. About 7 songs on that my last 2021 album were written in those 14 days of isolation.
See, and
Just
that's the brilliant thing about songwriting is creating, and it just is so natural for you that you can create an entire song, let alone an entire album within those 2 weeks. It's just it's just unbelievable. Just
thank you.
unbelievable.
It kept me
But
sane. It kept me sane.
that's what, yes, exactly, because you're known to be this compulsive songwriting, like you even described it as an addiction. And if that's your happy place, I mean, we love when you go to your happy place, Dan Hill.
Well, these days, of course, everything's changed. From when I first started making records back in '73, about 6 years before you were born, Meredith. Back then, people thought you were weird if you wrote songs, or if you wrote sad songs, they would call you the king of suicide rock. But now, of course, psychiatrists are saying that journaling is very important for mental wellness, right?
Yeah.
So basically, I've been journaling all my life. Songwriting is just another form of journaling, as is, let's say, the books I've written. And also now it's absolutely proven that sad songs, if you happen to feel sad yourself, if you listen to a sad song, they hook you up your brain, your dopamines rise, your serotonins rise. The sad songs are like very healing. So if you play Barry Manilow's Mandy, and you're
Yes.
guaranteed you're going to feel better. So it seems like and also back when I was starting out, it wasn't cool to be vulnerable as a man. These were the 3 bad words: the N word, the C word, and the W word, the wimp word. That was the worst thing you could be called as a male. Well, I got that
Yeah.
all the time. But now, of course, everybody's saying being vulnerable is a very, very important thing to do. So it's just fascinating over a course of 50 years, Meredith, how things have totally been turned on their head. I kind of call
Well,
it the revenge of Sometimes What We Touch, because even though it was such a smash at that time, it was kind of an unprecedented lyric for a man to sing. Men didn't sing those kind of words, and they
no.
certainly didn't sing them with the kind of voice that I sang it with. So even though it was ended up being one of the most played and covered songs of all time. At the time, the male critics said, "Oh, he's a disgrace he's an embarrassment to the Canadian music business, blah, blah, blah." But then look what's happened, 50 years later, and even back when I was hitting it big, groups like Fleetwood Mac, who I love, and the Bee Gees or Frampton, they were always getting murdered too. But now, if you read the New York Times, they're talking about how great these acts were. So it's kind of interesting how the times have changed. And in my case, though, again, I'm not a formula writer, it's just fascinating to see how it's changed for the better. I mean, my catalog of songs is doing way better than they've ever done before. It's a very, very strange, but lovely. It's lovely that now people finally understand that it's good to be vulnerable. As a male, it's good to express your emotions. I mean, one of the reasons
Yeah.
Drake and The Weeknd are doing so well is they're writing about vulnerability and fragility and alienation.
I agree. Yes, I do agree with that. They do write about that, and it's
Yes.
different. Yeah, and it's nice to have different.
Well, it's great. Even though we weren't allowed to feel those things out loud as males, we all feel them. We've all been hurt. When I tell my story about something that we touch, presumably everyone has a story similar to that. You know, uh, so people need, when people hear songs that are addressing these themes, it makes them feel less alone themselves, right? So Drake and The Weeknd are not formula songwriters by any, or Justin Bieber or Sean Desmond. They're writing about real, deeply emotional things that resonate. And so thank goodness now men are allowed to feel this way. Because if you're not allowed to feel that way, very, very bad things happen as a result of bottling all that in.
And the connection remains all of these decades later, which is so nice.
Yes, it does. For some strange reason, old music, and I guess I'm an old guy now, is outperforming new music. But again, that's nothing that you can predict. All we can do, Meredith, you, me, the people we love and care about, is we just do the best that we can do.
Day by day, Dan, day by day.
Right.
That's my motto. How did
Right.
you find Vonda?
Well, Vonda is a spectacular singer. With Can't We Try, we could not find a singer that could match the power of my vocal in Can't We Try. So we went through about 15 singers, audition, nope. And my record company, Sony or Columbia at the time, said, "Dan, you're going to have to put this out solo." I said, "No, I can't put this out solo. It's a duet. This is a conversation, a dialogue between a man and a woman." And so I was really lucky. The very last day in the studio in Santa Monica, Vonda bicycles into the studio. She's 22 years of age, and it's actually a very hard song to sing, and she just nailed it. And she literally saved my career, because without her vocal, that song would not have been a hit. A spectacular singer, an amazing talent. As you know, she went on to do all the music for Ally McBeal, and she scored that
Yep.
huge hit with Ally. Very, very gifted.
Oh, I think she's brilliant as well. And that song, I mean, my gosh, I just sang it to my daughter the other day while I'm sitting on my couch, and I'm doing both, both parts and like changing it up, pretending I'm you and pretending I'm Vonda. And she was like, "Gee, Mom, you really like this song. You know every word." I said, "I do. I love this song." Because I was telling her that I was going to sit down with you and talk to you. And I wanted her to hear the music. And my kids are 15. They're twin girls. So
Fantastic.
I always expose my kids to the great stuff, because this day and age, you don't always have the great stuff. And you got to bring them back in time to get those great songs.
Absolutely. And for the most part, Meredith, I remember doing this forum with Alicia Keys, in Manhattan, I don't know, quite a while ago. And the thing that we both established, which I think is most common for all of us, is we first are exposed to music through the music our parents are listening to.
Mm-hmm.
Not our parents, our older siblings, but given that I was the oldest, I think as was Alicia Keys, that's what we're turned on to. So I was turned on to black jazz because that's what all my dad listened to, and Vonda was turned on to R&B, and I mean Alicia Keys. So so you're right, to expose your 15-year-old daughters to the music that you love is a tradition that most parents have with their children, and it's a wonderful tradition.
Yeah, got to keep that tradition alive. Talk to me a
Absolutely.
little bit about getting inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame.
Well, I'm honored because these people that are already inducted, Buffy St. Marie, Bruce Coburn, Lightfoot, Joni Mitchell, Neil Young, they were basically my university education. I was a high school dropout, as I've already said. Formal learning was not was not a great place for me. I could not learn the things I needed to learn to become who I am in my career. So, how did I learn? I went to see every concert out there. I saw Elton John, I saw Billy Joel, I saw Cat Stevens, I saw Bonnie Raitt, I saw Lightfoot. I didn't realize at the time that this was my quote unquote homework. But this was how I figured out how to become better as a singer, songwriter, performer. Harry Chapin was an incredible storyteller. So from watching Harry Chapin, I learned the importance of telling stories, or the importance of writing songs that were stories. So what I had to say when I was interviewed about being inducted into the Canadian Songwriters Hall of Fame is that I'm thrilled because these were my college professors, basically these brilliant artists such as, say, Buffy Sainte-Marie.
Mm. Well, congratulations on that, because that is a wonderful thing to have, your name in, because you are one of the best. One of the other members that got inducted, a friend of mine, and I believe a friend of yours, he wanted me to say hello to you because I think it's been a while probably since you guys chatted, but Steve Dorff.
Steve Dorff is amazing. He's a brilliant singer, songwriter, piano player, and I was lucky enough to write with him way back in '79, again the year that you were born. So of course he should be in every Hall of Fame because he's a great songwriter and musician, but he's also a really wonderful human being.
He is a wonderful, I love that guy. And so
Yeah.
when I put out there that I was going to be talking to you, he wrote to me and he said, "Tell him I say hello." I said, "I will." So
Okay.
that's for from Steve, from me to you, from Steve.
Wonderful.
Um, you just collaborated on a new CD. Can you talk to me about the new music that you came up with, and who it's with?
Okay, well, the new single, I'm not sure if this is what you're referring to, so please correct me if I'm wrong, is Something More, the duet with Julie Black. Is that what you're referring
Yes.
to? So,
Yes, Julie Black.
yeah, basically, Meredith, my career has sort of gone into two parts. The first part of my career was me as a celebrity star, recording artist, touring, et cetera, with me having hits with my own songs. But once you cross the 40s threshold, when you're dealing in the music business, it's very, radio for the most part will not play you once. I don't care if you're, it's awful for females, even worse, but it's also awful for males. Elton John, for example, frequently complains that they're not playing his new songs, or you don't hear Springsteen's new songs or Neil Young's new songs. So what happened to me is I naturally pivoted into writing and producing songs for other artists, much the way you go from being an NBA basketball player to an NBA coach. So
Hmm.
there, what happened then was all these record companies were sending their artists to me because they needed hit songs, you know. So that's how I ended up meeting Julie Black 20 years ago. She was signed as an artist to Universal. She was signed as a songwriter to Warner's, and she was sent to my place in order to hopefully get new songs. We immediately hit it off. We had a lot in common, even though I'm almost a quarter of a century older than Julie. There was just this wonderful kind of connection that went beyond a professional connection. So we just sat side by side on my piano bench, and in the course of an hour, we wrote Something More. Again, it happened very, very quickly. I don't know how it managed to come out so quickly, and it was really, again, an extension of, it's sort of like the same syndrome as what we discussed about the writing of my song On the Other Side of Here.
Hmm.
There was as you know, that was just after 9/11. That was just on the eve of America invading Iraq, in Afghanistan. There was a lot of stuff out there that was traumatic and scary for everybody. And so, we set out to write a song just to for ourselves, as well as for the public at large, to say that even with all the stuff that's going on that we know is reprehensible, we have to believe, in order to persevere, that there is something more. There's got to be something more. So that's exactly how that song kind of wrote itself. because we ourselves were looking for something more. Julie talks about how the song still for her, resonates with her, still kind of coming to terms with her life and the things that she loves about her life and the things that she doesn't. So for Julie, I think it was a very, very personal something more, and for me, it was more of a macro thinking about what was going on in the world that was so horrible. And that my job right now, and I know this sounds really corny because sometimes I think I'm just too mainstream and I'm too safe. They'll book me in Malaysia, but they won't book Lady Gaga because they say she's too provocative. Well, I wish I was provocative, but I feel that my job right now is to put out things that are healing and spiritual, but not in a religious way, and optimistic, something that we all can hold on to somehow feel better about ourselves in this world. So something more is just another example of that.
Do you ever play shows anymore?
Yes, I do. I'm doing sometimes 2 shows a day, actually.
Where are you
I
usually traveling to do these shows?
well, I just got back from Nashville. I was doing lots of concerts there. I tour a lot in Asia, in the Philippines, in Malaysia, Singapore. I have some shows in New York City. I have some shows in LA and Vegas. I'm doing shows in Newfoundland. Half of my shows are special events, whereby I'm being hired to sort of sing at say for life coaches that work with Anthony Robbins. So especially
Mhm.
there's a great symposium happening in May about the powerful Black female mentors. So all these pillars of our society that are really rocking it as Black women, say film writers, directors, politicians, are
Cool.
talking to a Black audience about how they empower themselves. And I'm the token male that sings a couple songs. And I talk about my Black mentors were Tina Turner and Donna Summer. They're the ones that really helped me,
Yes.
so, so a lot of them are special events and a lot of them are just concerts. I'm doing a sold out show, for example, in Grand Bend, or I'm doing a house party in Newfoundland. I kind of like mixing it up that way. I play a lot of weddings, bar mitzvahs, that kind of thing.
Oh yeah. Got to get in those mitzvahs.
Yeah, exactly.
How
Yeah,
do the
because
13-year-olds take to Dan Hill? I love that. That's
well,
awesome.
interestingly, there's this one special event I have to do. Is there's a 9-year-old boy in Connecticut who feels that Sometimes When We Touch is his favorite song of all time. A 9-year-old boy, his parents weren't even alive when that song came out. So I fly to Connecticut. I sing Sometimes When We Touch with him on guitar. Then we sing it again together, and then I sing I Do Cherish You. Every time I released a single, there was always this discussion with the record company. We know that people your age then are going to get it, but will young girls and boys get it? They were worried about that with Sometimes When We Touch, with Can't We Try? But bam, the minute it hit the radio, the people that were calling for the songs were 12-year-old girls.
Wow. Man, I
So
don't
it's
know what it's going to take, but we got to get you down to Baltimore.
well, yeah, I spent a lot of time in Baltimore, Washington, because that's where my grandparents were from. That's where my dad was born.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Where was he born exactly?
my dad was, well, actually, he was born in Independence, Missouri, but his father was a Black Methodist minister. So then they moved back to Washington, D.C., where my dad and his 3 sisters were born. So that's the place where all my relatives on my dad's side came out of, was Washington, D.C., Baltimore.
Wow. Okay. I'm about an hour north of DC in
Well,
Maryland, so
yeah, Maryland's gorgeous. I'm so happy for you. That's a wonderful place to live. Good for you,
you'll have
Mary.
to come down. We'll get some steamed crabs and you'll sing Sometimes When We Touch at the seafood restaurant for everybody and they'll be thrilled.
Yeah, I'd love that. Yeah, I'll just take out my guitar or my piano or my keyboard, and I'll sing that. It's actually most of these songs sound really good too when they're just stripped down to just one instrument and voice,
Mhm.
because they're meant to be written that way. They were meant to be written in a way that you could just sit down and play it on guitar or piano without this sort of epic production.
I'm going to tell you exactly what I told Bill Champlin. I
Okay,
said,
who I
"Bill,
love, by
you
the
can
way.
what?"
I love Bill Champlin.
I mean, who doesn't love Bill? I mean,
Yeah,
it's Bill. I said, Bill, you could sing me the phone book and I'd be happy. I don't care. Just open up the mouth and let the notes come out. I don't care. Sing whatever. Sing whatever. It's the same thing with you, Dan. I mean, the voice is there's nobody like you, you know? There's nobody that sounds like you. There's nobody like you. You're very unique, which is so beautiful and wonderful to have.
thank you. Part of that, I think, is just luck. I mean, I don't think we really can contrive our voices to sound. I mean, we can become better singers by doing all these things we need to do. I used to just listen to all these records, like Robert Plant singing "Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You," and I'd be trying to hit all the high C's he was hitting when I was 12. But
Yeah.
that said, still, I think we're kind of, for example, your speaking voice. You're born with your speaking voice, Meredith. And so part of that is just genetic fluke. That you're born with a singing voice that sounds absolutely distinctive. I mean, obviously, if you hear Marvin Gaye or Stevie Wonder or Smokey Robinson, within 2 words, you know who the singer is. But I think
Hmm.
in my case anyway, I have to say a lot of that was just pure luck. That I was born with a distinctive voice.
Like I said, a gift. We talked
Yes.
about Goosey. We talked about
Yeah.
you giving everybody else Gooseys. What's Dan Hill's Goosey moment? Meaning, what's something in your career that when you think about it, it gives you goosebumps because you got a chance to do that or live it?
Well, let me see. There's been so much. One of my goosebump moments was living with Donna Summer the late Donna Summer, sadly enough, in her Santa Monica home at the time. I would have to say it was around 1985. So I experienced this both with Donna Summer and with Tina Turner and with George Benson. The Goosey moment is no matter how magnificent these singers sound on vinyl or on CD, when you're actually hearing them, when you're standing only 2 feet from them, it's like hearing them in 3 dimensions rather than two. To stand 2 feet away from Donna Summer and hearing her unload as a singer, it's like, I cannot believe I've just witnessed the sixth wonder of the world and I'm getting paid to do this. Those have been my Goosey moments. Listening to Tina Turner, Donna Summer, George Benson sing as they're only like 2 feet away from me. That's it. You
Oh
can't
yeah.
get that.
So why were you living with Donna Summer? I
Because
want the
she
scoop.
fell in love with my demo. Well, first of all, when I co-wrote with Michael Master "In Your Eyes," everything Michael ever produced or wrote, even though he's a Jew from Philadelphia, every hit song he wrote and produced were for Black artists. Didn't we almost have it all? The greatest love of all. So when we wrote "In Your Eyes," the first person to cut that song the first group was Kool and the Gang. Then it was Jeffrey Osborne. Then it was George Benson. So a lot of the Black community is very aware of what all the other Black artists are doing. So
Hmm.
between Contemporary Touch and then In Your Eyes, which in many territories was an even bigger hit for me than sometimes. Again, it wasn't my hit, but so people like Donna Summer and Roberta Flack and Gladys Knight, they all became, and even Aretha Franklin became very aware of me with the combination of Sometimes When We Touch, which at first was only covered by Black artists, by the way, and In Your Eyes. So, and then Donna Summer heard my demo for Can't We Try. So it was the demo before it was an actual hit. And she loved the Can't We Try demo so much that she asked me to come down to Santa Monica and write with her, which I did for 2 weeks.
Oh, that's very cool. Again, like these are the things that you don't just know about a songwriter or an artist. This is
Yeah.
why interviews need to take place so that you ask the questions and you get these answers. That's amazing. That is amazing. What's next for you? What do you have on the horizon?
Well, I have a song out in country in America right now doing really good. It's called She Did with this artist Nolan Sotillo out of Sony BMG. Uh, I am going to be writing with brilliant singer-songwriter country artists signed to epic record deals in America. My key to one of my successes, Meredith, is to work with these artists before they're stars. I was working with Celine before she could even speak English, before anybody knew her outside of French Quebec. Same with
Wow.
Vonda Shepherd, same with Julie Black, same with Deborah Cox. All these artists I worked with before anybody knew who they were. So I'm going back to Nashville, and there's an incredibly gifted singer-songwriter who's signed to Warner's. He's working on his debut album. And also, again, Keith Stegall, my best friend, has his own label distributed by Sony BMG. He signed a genius 20-year-old female singer-songwriter from Nova Scotia. So I'm going down there to write with these artists for their debut albums. I love writing with people that are young like that because they're fresh, they're hungry, they're unspoiled, and they don't have that kind of diva-like attitude that can sometimes happen. Even Britney
Yeah,
Spears, when I worked with her, no one really knew who she was, right? So I like to get in there before people know who these people are.
that's amazing. That's amazing. Dan Hill, thank you so much for coming on Zoom with me and chatting with me. And it's quite an honor, sir. I mean, really, because I have adored you for many, many decades. And even since I was, little mare.
You're very
And
kind, Meredith. I love talking to you so much. It just felt like a conversation. It didn't even feel like an interview for me. Thank you.
then I did a good job, right? A job well done.
Perfect job. Not good, superlative.
I'll have to message you afterwards because I'll have to get you together with Steve Dorff when you go down to Nashville. That's where he
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. I love Steve. It'd be so great to see him again. I'm a huge admirer. I respect him a great deal. You know, he's
Cool.
written.
When you do that, take a picture and send it to me.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Stay safe, stay well, and keep on writing, my friend. Okay. And maybe we'll chat again soon.
Perfect. Meredith, you have a wonderful day. Thank you for taking out the time to talk to me.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye for now.